Hello and welcome to Computer Science 2212, Introduction to Software Engineering. And in this video, we're going to quickly cover the course syllabus because we don't have a time to meet this week, and this is a hybrid style course. We're both going to watch videos and attend some lectures in class. So first, I should introduce myself. My name is Daniel Servos, and I am part of the teaching faculty here in the Computer Science Department at Western University. My background is I got my PhD in computer science here at Western, and my research was in access control. I also have a master's degree and undergraduate degree in computer science that I got from Lakehead University. So that's me here on the screen right now, and you can also see my contact information. So if any time during the course you need to contact me, my email is dservos5@uw.ca, and I also have office hours by appointment. To make an office hour by appointment, just follow the link on the screen, danielservos.ca/apt, and it will show you available times. I have times available both for online meetings as well as in person in my office, MC387. That is on the third floor of Middlesex College, which you can find about here on the right-hand side of the building if you're facing it. So what is this course? What have you gotten yourself into? Well, Computer Science 2212 is an introduction to software engineering and its application in team software projects. And that team software project element is going to be a big part of this course. This is a project course, and you are going to be working with the team on a specific software project. Also in this course, we will examine the stages of the software engineering process, including requirements gathering, specification, design, implementation, and testing. We also cover all the practices of software engineering and a number of the key tools and technologies leveraged in successful endeavors in software and development. So the format of this course, as I mentioned, is going to be hybrid or blended. That means we're going to both have in-class lectures as well as online components and videos. So the way this will work is the Monday lecture time, that's 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., is going to have lectures, tutorials, and some short group work activities. Attendance in this Monday lecture is required, and you are expected to actively participate in this lecture. And that will be part of your final grade, and we'll get to that shortly. The other lecture we have each week, the Wednesday lecture time, which is 3:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, is an optional lecture. Let me explain how that's going to work. So there's no in-person lecture on weeks without quizzes. What that means is we're going to have 3 quizzes throughout the term. If there's a week with a quiz, that means you have to attend the Wednesday lecture because that's where the quiz is going to be held. Otherwise, if it's a Wednesday without a quiz, that means there is no class held on that day. Instead, it's going to be time to watch those online videos, as well as time to meet and work with your team on the group project. We're giving you this time. You can decide to use that at 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday or not. You can meet with your team another time, but we wanted to have a set time where everyone on the team could meet to get together and no one has an excuse to say that they're busy because you should have that lecture time booked. So once again, Monday lectures are required. Always go to the Monday lecture. Wednesday lectures, you only need to be there if there is a quiz being held, and we'll let you know when that is. Otherwise, I won't be there. No one's going to be there on Wednesday. Instead, that'll be a time to meet with your team. So you can work with your team to schedule where that will happen and even be online if you want. So there are a few course sites that we're going to have to worry about. The first one is OWL Brightspace, and that is Western's learning management system. For those of you that are new to Western or those of you that are used to the old learning management system, OWL Brightspace is a new learning management system, so it might take some getting used to. It's replacing our old version of OWL. And on there, you'll find everything you need for the course. Syllabus, slides, project details and resources, forums where you can ask questions and talk to your classmates, as well as that's where I'll be posting announcements, weekly readings, the homework for the week, tasks, and other things like supplementary resources. That's going to be updated each week on Monday. So make sure you check that out on Mondays, though I do recommend checking it more than once a week. Another course site that we're going to have to worry about is the CS1.ca Ask tool. And this is only something that we're going to use in class. And when we have our first in-person lecture, we will go over how to use it. But essentially, it's a way to ask questions live during class and me to see them on my screen. They won't be shown on the big screen behind me. And also, we'll occasionally have group work in class. So most Monday lectures will have a group work component, or at least some sort of activity that we do together as a class. When we give one of those activities, I'll put out a code, and you have to enter that code in the system to prove you were there and participating. It also lets you to check what kind of codes you've put in so far. Next up is GitLab. GitLab is where we're going to be hosting everything you need for the project. So this is where your team's Git repository is going to be, wiki, issue tracker, things like that. It's where you're going to manage your project with your team, and your team of students will have access to a specific GitLab setup just for your team. And we're going to give a lot more details on this once teams are formed. Right now, you won't have access to it. Okay, next up, the textbook. So this course does have 2 textbooks. One is required and one is strongly recommended. The required text is Software Engineering, A Practitioner's Approach, 9th edition. And this is available in 2 formats, either an e-text rental that you can keep for a short time in electronic format, or a physical copy that you get to keep forever. You can get either copy at Western's bookstore. For the physical copy, you just buy a book, traditional way. For the e-text, I believe they'll give you a code and you can access that online. So how are we going to use this textbook? Well, each week I'm going to assign readings from the textbook that you're expected to know, and some of that could come up on quizzes. Also from the textbook, I will be assigning homework questions each week, but those homework questions are ungraded and for your own studying purposes. The reason why we list it as required, as material from those chapters could come up on a quiz. And it looks something like this. Okay. So if you really want to know what content exactly we're reading from this textbook, I have a list here. You can also find that in the slides for this video. This is our tentative reading list. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but in general, we're going to be covering most of these chapters in relatively this order. The other textbook, which is technically optional, is UML Distilled. Now, I do say this is optional because we're not really going to be assigning much from it, and there's not going to be homework from it. But it is an extremely important resource, and it's really great to have. Other computer science courses in the department also use it. So it might be great to get it now, because you're probably going to have to buy it anyway. And what this book does is it breaks down UML, the Uniform Modeling Language, in a really easy to understand way that's really accessible. I think it'll be a great asset to you and your team. So I would recommend either getting a copy or at least making sure someone in your team has a copy of this, because we will be doing a lot of UML for the group project. So can't stress enough, strongly recommended. And it looks something like this. Next up, and what you've probably been looking forward to seeing, is how you're going to be evaluated. So there's 3 big elements to this course. There's the group project, which is the main focus of the course, and as such, it's worth 60%. The other big element is participation, and that's going to come from actually being active and participating in that Monday lecture. There's a few other ways you can earn points too. We'll talk about those in a bit. The last element is quizzes, 3 of them, or a final exam. We'll explain what that means in a sec. Okay, there are some very important essential requirements we should talk about. So these are things you have to complete or have to satisfy to pass this course. So it doesn't matter what your grade is otherwise. If you don't satisfy every single one of these requirements, you won't pass the course. So please listen up. To be eligible to obtain a passing mark, that's 50% or over in this course, you have to satisfy all of these requirements. So requirement 1 is you have to obtain a weighted quiz/final exam grade of at least 40%. So between all the quiz or final exam elements that you're going to do, averaged together by their weight, you have to have at least 40%. Number 2 is you must attend and be present in person at the acceptance testing meeting with your team and TA at the end of the term. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec, but basically at the end of the term, there's going to be a time where you meet with your TA to show them your project. Since you're part of that team, you need to be at that meeting. Number 3, you must attend and be an active participant in at least 5 team meetings. and 2 TA meetings. We'll explain what those are in a little bit, but basically every week, you're expected to work with your team on the group project. This requirement just says you actually have to participate in the group project to pass the course. And number 4 is the same sort of idea. You must obtain a grade of at least 40% or over on your team's peer evaluation of your performance and work in your team project. So the whole point of requirements 2 to 4 are to ensure that you're actively engaging and working in that group project. We don't want anyone to just be there and get credit for other people's work. So if you fail to satisfy any of these criteria, your maximum final grade for this course will be capped at 45%. So there is a second set of essential requirements, except this is for a grade of C or higher, so that's 60% or over. And these are very similar requirements, except the weights are a little bit different. So for Rule 1, instead of 40%, you need at least 50% on those quizzes and final exam. You still need to be present at that acceptance testing meeting. And for number 3, the number's a little bit higher. You have to be an active participant in at least 6 team meetings and at least 3 TA meetings, and you have to obtain a grade of 50% or over on your peer evaluations. Now that might sound a little bit scary, but in the history of this course, at least as long as I've been teaching it, there's been very, very few students that scored less than 50% on those team evaluations. And in almost all those cases, those were students that just ghosted their team at the beginning of the term and never talked to them. So again, rules 2 to 4, if you're an active participant in that group project, you should be fine. And again, in this case, if you don't satisfy these, the final grade for your course will be capped at 58%. Okay, on to that group project. So as we've been saying, all students are required to be an active participant in a term-long group project that will involve the specification, design, and implementation of a reasonably large-scale software system implemented using Java. So there are some important group project rules that we should go over, so everyone's on the same page. First, all team members are expected to contribute, at least in some way, to every project component, including requirements, design, implementation, and testing. So you can't just say, well, I'm doing the design work, I'm not going to do any code. You have to contribute something to each part. We want you to learn about the whole software engineering process, not just one part of it. Next are all teams must make active use of the GitLab software. And this just means that you have to store your code on the GitLab site that you are provided, as well as any documentation. You can't store that somewhere else. This is to allow your team's TA to be able to see it and grade it. And I should also be clear that you have to do this actively throughout the whole project. You can't just wait till the very last day and upload everything to your GitLab site. You should be using GitLab as it's intended, as a collaborative repository where everyone's working on the code together. Number 3 is all teams must hold and document weekly face-to-face meetings. As I mentioned before, there is going to be weekly team meetings where you work with your team and work on the project. These have to be documented by taking minutes, and this is the responsibility of your team. These minutes don't have to be a transcript of everything that happened. Rather, they should just be point form record of who was there, what the date of the meeting was, where it was held, as well as what decisions were made and what actions items your team is going to take. So what is the topic of the project going to be? Well, I will be posting a full specification later on that's going to give you all the details, but a brief summary is we're going to be making a virtual pet game. So the main purpose of this project will be to create an educational virtual pet game. And the goal here is to teach the player how to take care of a pet. This game isn't going to be visually intensive. It's not going to be like a 3D action game or something like that. Rather, it's going to be a fairly simple GUI, and you should be keeping track of vital statistics about this pet, sort of like their health, hunger, sleep, exercise, and so on, and to give the player ways to interact with the pet that alter these statistics. Maybe you take the pet for a walk, they get more exercise points. If you feed the pet, they're less hungry, and so on. And as I said before, the game does not necessarily have to be graphically demanding. We know you don't have that much background in game programming or graphics yet, so what we're really expecting here is mostly a fairly basic GUI that has a picture of the pet that changes based on a few different things. Maybe if it's sick, it shows a different image than if it's happy and healthy. It does have to have a GUI because some of the things we'll be talking about in this course are about graphical interfaces and how best to design them, and it also has to follow best practices for UI design as well as software engineering. Now, don't be too worried about that GUI. You are allowed to use tools to help you build the GUI, including GUI builder tools that come with many IDEs for Java. And we will be talking about that a little bit in the course. So the overall goal, if you remember these things, is basically to make one of those Tamagotchis or Nanos back from the 90s. Those were little virtual pets you could have on a keyring, and you'd have a few basic features like feed it, walk it, and it would show you statistics about it. And if you weren't doing a good job, the pet would die. In this case, we're not making a piece of physical hardware, but some actual software on the computer. But don't get started coding yet. We haven't released the full project specification. That's going to be posted on OWL by September 23rd. So once you have your teams formed and everyone's ready to go, we'll post a specification and you can start to see what you're going to have to do. And that's going to be broken up into different components or milestones. And this is a software engineering course, so a lot of that focus is going to be on that planning and documentation, rather than necessarily jumping into coding right away. So now we're going to go over some of your responsibilities and your group's responsibilities in this project. So the first of all, you're going to have to form your team. And teams are going to be of 4 or 5 students, 5 preferred, and you're going to make a team request on OWL by joining an open team. But don't worry, if for some reason you can't join a team, you don't know anyone, or you just don't want to pick your own team, if you don't do that by September 13th, I'll place you on one. So you can either pick a team or you can be placed on one. So if you request a team with less than 5 students, I may add more members to top you up. I will try to honor your requests, but keep in mind there can be cases where I need to split up a team just to push or make everything even for all students. The other responsibility you're going to have is to meet with your group weekly, starting the week of September 23rd. These weekly meetings can be done in person or online, but they have to be face-to-face. So what that means for online is you have to use something like with a web camera. So Zoom would be fine, Microsoft Teams, but not something like text-based chat or voice only. So it does have to have some face-to-face element. The meeting times must be arranged that work for everyone in your group, and they can't be held on holidays or reading week. However, remember, we don't have that Wednesday lecture except when there's a quiz, so everyone on your team should at least be able to meet on the Wednesday time. The meeting length should be at least 1 hour, but it can be longer depending on what your group's needs and requirements. Usually teams have short meetings at the start of the project, and they get longer near the end where they need to start actually coding and implementing things. Next responsibility is to meet with your assigned TA every other week. So each team is going to be assigned a specific teaching assistant that will follow that team through the project. They're going to be the TA that you meet with, and they're going to usually be the TA marking your work, because they'll be the most familiar with your project and how you're doing. So you must work with your assigned TA to find a day and time to meet every other week. Meetings with the TA are going to be at most 20 minutes in length. And the goal of these meetings is to be a sort of scrum meeting where you discuss your progress your group's made in the last week or two. You create plans and tasks for the next week that you're going to complete. And you work with the TA on any issues that have arisen over the last week. The TA may also take this time to update you on anything that's going on in the project or the class. But really, it's up to your team to take the most advantage of these meetings. If you are having a lot of issues or there's some group dynamics that aren't working properly, this is your time to work with the TA to get that sorted out. So it's also going to be your team's responsibility to take minutes of these TA meetings, just like you would during the general group meeting. And the week you meet with your TA is going to be based on your assigned team number. So after teams are formed, I'm going to give each team a number, and based on if that number is odd or even, it will determine what weeks you meet with your TA. So I have a schedule here, but basically even teams meet in even weeks, and odd teams are going to meet in odd weeks, where this is considered to be week 0, and next week is considered to be week 1. Okay, our last sets of responsibilities. First, define clear roles and expectations for your team. So each team's going to create a team contract, and don't worry, we'll talk more about that. And this contract is going to basically say who's going to do X, who's responsible for Y, minimum length of time requirements that you expect everyone on your team to be working on the project for each week, meeting times, length, basically all your expectations of your other group members will be in the team contract. And we're going to use this team contract to determine things like if you actually performed everything you were required to in the group project. So it is important to think this out. The next responsibility is to decide on a common development environment and tools. So we're going to give you a little bit of freedom in what sort of tools you use in this project. It does have to be Java, but the IDE, third-party libraries, and so on are going to be up to you. The last requirement is to demonstrate the project at the end of the term. As I mentioned, there is going to be an acceptance testing meeting, and this is just a meeting with your TA where you demo the final completed project to the TA, and they're going to have a checklist where they go over and make sure you completed all the requirements. The second way you're going to demonstrate your project at the end of the term, and this is going to be for other teams, sort of to show the class your work, is you're going to create a video that shows off your project and sort of gives a quick demo of the work you did. We're going to host those on YouTube, and then other teams will be able to do a peer evaluation of your work. Okay, I know that was a lot to go over, but now we're going to break down how the group project is going to be weighted and graded. So there is going to be about 4 big milestones throughout the term. The first is going to be requirements documentation, and that's going to be worth 8% of your grade. That's going to be due around October 10th. Next will be design documentation, due around November 8th, and will be worth about 8%. And implementation and testing, that's where you actually make it and test it. It's going to be a bigger percentage, 22%, and that's going to be due December 1st, close to the end of the term. Project video and acceptance testing, that's where you actually make the video demo of your project, is going to be due the same day, December 1st, and that's going to be worth 10%. Then there's also 2 individual components. A project postmortem, this is where you sort of review your other teammates, as well as another team, and write up a short description of how the project went for you, how you think you could do better. The next one is the peer review of you by your team. So this isn't something you have to do. This means that 10% of your grade is going to be based on the peer review that your team gave you. There are a few other important dates to be aware of. The group project specification is going to be posted September 23rd. That's where I'm going to give details of the whole project that you can read through. Team requests are due by September 13th at midnight. If you don't get your question by then, you're going to be assigned to a team by me. Team lists will be available the week of September 16th, and that's really when you can start working on the project. And then you're going to be required to start meeting with your teams on September 23rd. Finally, project demonstrations, that's acceptance testing, will be scheduled between December 1st and December 6th, inclusive. That's the last week of class. So what happens if you have to submit something late as a team? Maybe something comes up, maybe you have an extra work in another course like a midterm, or maybe someone's sick, and that requires you to submit late. So what can you do? Well, this course uses a late coupon system. What this means is that each team is going to be given 5 late coupons. So to be clear, not individual, not person, not student, each team as a whole is given 5 late coupons for the whole term. Once they're used, they're gone forever, so you do have to manage these well. And the way this works is each coupon adds a grace period of 24 hours per coupon, where there's no late penalty. So that means if you use 1 late coupon, you get 1 day grace period. If you use 2 days grace period, and so on, up to a maximum of 3 coupons per project component. So no action is required by a team to use a late coupon. Simply submit late, and the correct number of late coupons will be deducted by the TA marking it. If insufficient late coupons remain and you submit late, or if you submit more than 3 days late, a 0 grade will be given to that component. So it is important that you do pay attention and manage your late coupons well. It is your responsibility as a team to track them and keep track of how many you've used so far to make sure you don't accidentally submit late without prior number of late coupons. We will try to post on OWL an estimate of them, but the TAs don't always update these live, so it's important to keep track yourself. So there are a few important exceptions to the late coupon policy, and it is important that you're aware of them because you can't use late coupon on these things. First of all, late coupons cannot be used on anything that isn't a group project component. So you can't use them on a quiz, you can't use them on the final exam, you can't use them on your peer review because the peer reviews are individual work. There also is one group project component you can't use them on, and that is the final project video. That's where you make that video as part of your delivery of the project that demos everything in your video so other teams can do a peer review of you. The reason why that can't be submitted late is because other teams would have nothing to review if you did that. So remember, you can't submit that video late. So make sure you get started on that video as soon as you can once your project's ready. And now I'm required to do a quick word on academic dishonesty and scholastic offenses. That essentially means cheating. So since this is a group project-based course, our views of academic dishonesty are a little bit different in this course. Groups are encouraged to discuss the project together, of course. You have to work with each other, so you can't really copy off another group member when it comes to actually working on the group project. However, things like quizzes obviously are individual work. You are also allowed to talk about the project and ask other groups about their project, but you shouldn't be sharing anything between groups, only within your group. So as this says, no code or documentation should be shared between groups. If you have to post a code fragment, that's fine, like a small bit of code. Don't post whole files. You're free to help other groups in terms of general programming advice, things like that, but there should never be sharing of code or sharing of documents. Every group should be somewhat distinct from the other in the work they submit. So if you use code or documentation from another source, that is allowed in this course if it's reasonable. For example, something you find online or something you generated with the tool, it must be clearly indicated and correctly cited. So let's say you use the GUI builder from an IDE to help you build the GUI for your project. That's fine, but you do have to, in the comments of your source code, say this was generated by like the NetBeans IDE. Or if you use a tool like ChatGPT to help you out, you have to clearly indicate what code was written by ChatGPT. If you find something online, like on Stack Overflow, and you use that, again, you have to clearly indicate what was written by someone else. So another important point is only you and your group members can work on your project. No tutors, friends who are not in the group, other group members, outside services, no one like that can work on your group project. Only the members of your group can work and submit files for your group project. And you can't use pre-existing work from other courses. So maybe, for example, you made a virtual pet for another course for some reason. You can't use that for this course. If you took this course in a previous term and for some reason they did a similar project, you can't use that for this course either. Everything has to be written for this term with your current group. If there is something that you've written for a past course and you are not sure about, please contact me and we can discuss it. But unless you have written permission from me, don't assume that you can use something from another course. Okay, on to participation. And that is worth 10% of your grade. So how is that going to work? Well, we're going to use a point system to track participation. There's going to be a number of different activities in the course. Most will be in the Monday lecture that are going to grant participation points. These will be available both inside the classroom on Monday lectures, as well as a few opportunities outside the classroom. The number of participation points you have at the end of the course will determine your participation grade. But note that this isn't simple division. It's not your participation points divided by the total available. It's going to use a table, and we'll see that in a second. So each week we'll have at least 150 points available from in-class activities. And this will be the primary way that you earn participation points for this grade. In fact, you can earn the full participation grade just from going to the Monday class and being an active participant. However, we also offer other ways for you to earn points to make up for that. This includes things like answering other students' questions on the course forums. So if someone posts a question and it hasn't been answered yet, and you post an answer and it's helpful and meaningful, and it was done in a timely fashion, you can earn extra points. You can also earn extra points by answering a question out loud in class. So if I ask a question to the class, and you put up your hand and I choose you, you will get a little participation ticket. If you submit this participation ticket for the CS1 tool, you will have points added to your account. And the other way you can earn points is simply by attending TA group meetings, something you already have to do, and it earns you participation points. Again, to be clear, all these things are extra. You don't have to do them and get the full participation grade. The main way to get the participation grade is going to the Monday lectures. And if you want a full way of all the ways you can earn points, or at least most of them, you can check out the course syllabus. I'll also occasionally give opportunities for bonus points. So how will this be converted into a final grade? Well, it uses this lookup table. And this works sort of like an RPG's experience system, if you ever played a video game like that. The idea here is to get up to the next level or grade level, you have to get over the minimum points listed here. So for example, to get the full grade, the full 10%, you need at least 2,300 points. Now that sounds like a lot, but again, this should be possible from just going to in-class activities. I should also point out that you have to get over each minimum. So for example, if you got 1,800, that won't be a 9%, it won't be like an 8.5, that's an 8% because you only got over the minimum for the 8% level. To get the full grade, you have to get over 2,300. So the other thing you'll see at the bottom here is there is a level 11. So if you do an amazing job, you go to all those Monday lectures and you do some extra things, there is an opportunity for bonus marks. If you get over 2,700 participation points, you will get a bonus. The amount that bonus isn't yet determined. It'll depend on how many people get over that amount and how far over you are that amount, but it'll be between a 0% bonus and a 2% bonus, depending on how many points over 2,700. And just to be clear, that can't make your final grade go over 100%. Okay, there's a few things to keep in mind for participation that I should stress. First is there are a limited number of opportunities for participation tickets. That's where in class, ask a question, you put up your hand, if you answer it, you get a ticket. But keep in mind, you can still get the full participation grade without ever answering a question in class. The main points in class come from doing the group work in class or doing the activity in class, and then inputting the group code that says, I was here and I did this group work. The participation tickets, that's where you answer a question by putting your hand up, are just a bonus. Same thing, there is going to be a limited number of opportunities to answer questions on the course forums because that's dependent on people posting questions. So again, that's not the main way you earn participation points. You can get a full participation grade without that. That's just a bonus for being helpful. So I would say it's best to focus on the in-class group work and not missing those Monday lectures unnecessarily. The last component we have to talk about are quizzes or final exam. So in this course, to make things easier for you and to fit everything into how you're working on the project, we give you an option. You can either choose to write 3 quizzes worth 10% each, totaling 30% during the term, or you can write a final exam worth 30% during the final exam period at the end of the term. Now, there are some important trade-offs to consider here. Writing the 3 quizzes during the term might be good because that means it gives you more free time at the end of the course to work on that final project. And that's why we're trying out this system this term. So you can say, I'd rather worry about studying during the course rather than at the end where I'm going to be stressing about the final project. But if you are fine with writing a final exam during the final exam period, you also have that option. But there is a third option, which is sort of a hybrid, a combination of options 1 and 2. And the way this works is the weight of the final exam is going to be equal to any missed quizzes. So any quiz you don't write, regardless of the reason, the weight of that will go onto the final exam. So you can sort of think of this as the final exam being worth 0%, and then the worth of that final exam goes up for every quiz you don't write. So if you miss 1 quiz, the final exam is worth 10%. If you miss 2 quizzes, it's worth 20%. If you miss all 3 quizzes, the final exam will be worth 30%. If you write all 3 quizzes, then your final exam is 0% and you don't write it. So this gives both flexibility in when you write quizzes, as well as flexibility in case anything goes wrong. If you're sick, you just don't write the quiz and it's moved to the final exam. I should note though, if you do write a quiz, you start writing it, you're in that lecture, start putting your name on that paper, then you are locked in. So if you write the quiz, then that 10% is locked into that quiz grade. So the only way it will be shifted to the final exam is if you don't show up for the quiz. And like I said, if you write all 3 quizzes, you don't have to take the final exam because the full worth will be on your 3 quizzes. Now, a few notes about the quizzes. They're going to occur in person during Wednesday lecture time. The length of each quiz will be different, but not more than an hour. Most will be 40 minutes. The format of each quiz may be different and will be announced before the quiz. They're going to be closed book, no notes, references, electronic devices, anything like that. And the content for that quiz may include anything covered in the course up until that point. So I would cover in-class materials, videos, or assigned readings up until that point in the course. I will try to give a more exact content list for what will be on the quiz before the quiz. This is also something to consider if you're going to write the quiz or a final exam, because the quizzes only cover up to that point in the course. So that means the quizzes will have less content to study for, where the final exam, you have to study for everything. Some people like that more, so make sure you consider that when you're choosing if you're going to write a quiz or put that weight onto the final exam. So we do have some tentative dates for the quizzes. It's possible these might change a bit, and the official dates will be posted on OWL, but right now they're planned for October 2nd, 30th, and 27th. And they're each going to be worth 10%. And like I said, any missed quizzes, the weight goes on to the final exam. Now the final exam is going to be very similar in terms of format and what's going to be on it, except it covers the whole course. It's going to be closed book, it's going to be on paper, and you are only required, like I've been saying it, to write it if you have not written one of the quizzes. If you just miss one quiz or any number of quizzes, you should write the final exam, because that's where that 10% for that quiz you missed is going to be. So the weight of the final exam is equal to the weight of all missed quizzes. If you miss none, it means you don't have to write it. If you missed at least one, then you should write it. It's going to be held during the final exam period. It's going to be a 3-hour exam. So even if you miss one quiz, you still have to write the 3-hour exam. And it's going to be closed book and comprehensive. Now we should talk a little bit about weekly time requirements to get an idea of how much time this course is going to take. It is a project course, so it might be a little bit bigger than your normal course. First of all, there are in-person lectures. There's going to be 2 hours a week on Monday. Remember, the Wednesday lecture, only for quizzes. There's also going to be videos posted. Most weeks will have a video or two to watch, and I'm aiming for no more than 2 hours in a given week of videos, and that is an overestimate. Next, weekly group meetings. So at least 1 hour per week you should be meeting with your group, but keep in mind that will probably be longer as we get closer to the end of the course and you're starting to implement your project. Next are TA group meetings. It's going to be every other week. Your team has to meet with the TA and just go over how things are going. That's going to be at most 20 minutes each. Readings, there's going to be 2 chapters on average assigned from the textbook, no more than 3 chapters in a week. And recommended homework, there's going to be 3 to 8 questions per chapter that come from the textbook, but again, these are ungraded and just for studying purposes. And project work. So this is probably going to be the biggest amount, but it's also the hardest to predict about how much it is because it's going to be so much up to your group, how you're planning to do things, and when you're doing things. So I like to say it's going to be minimal for the first weeks, especially when you don't even have a team yet, but then it will grow more significant near the end of the term. And that's why we give you that flexibility with the final exam or quizzes. If you think I'm going to be working on this project, you might want to focus on writing quizzes rather than putting everything on a final exam. Now, our last thing we need to do this week is take the syllabus quiz. So your next step will be to take that syllabus quiz on OWL. Don't worry, it's not graded traditionally, like it's not a percentage you have to get, but you do get 50 participation points for completing it. So regardless of your score on the quiz, as long as you attempt the quiz on OWL, you will get 50 participation points. But to get those points, you do have to complete it by September 23rd to count. So please go to OWL Brightspace and you'll be able to find this syllabus quiz under Assessments and then Quizzes. That's all I have for you in this video. Your next step, other than the syllabus quiz, should definitely be reading the syllabus. There's a few complex rules in this course, and I highly recommend that you read it so you understand how everything works. If you have any questions at all, feel free to post on the course forums or send me an email. We will be meeting next week on Monday, so please make sure you're there. We won't be going too much over the syllabus. We'll be getting right into some course content. Thank you for watching and have a great day.